So this lecture is going to be about a little bit of background and historical study, okay? I need you to understand things point by point by point. So some points about the history of the Arabs. Some points about the history of the Arabs you need to know. The Arabs basically were a desert people, okay? They were a desert people. They were not like the Roman Empire or the Persian Empire, you know, or the Abyssinian Empire. They did not have castles, and they did not have huge armies, and they did not have roadways and universities and libraries. This is not the Arabs. The Arabs had desert, some patches of green, some ocean, way on the other side of the desert, and they traveled like nomads. You know what nomads are? They go from one place to another place to another place. They set up camp. They stay there for a little while, then they move on, then they set up camp, then they move on for a little while. They had some cities and some small cities, but they were really, really like villages more than they were like cities. Okay? This was basically the lifestyle of the Arabs. So they were left far behind the developments of what was happening in some of the major kingdoms and empires of the time. Like I kept mentioning the Romans, right? The Romans were making huge advances. As a matter of fact, the Persians and even the Indians had empires and had kingdoms, but they didn't. Now, the Arabs also, the climate they lived in is a desert. So nobody was interested in conquering the Arabs. Can you guess why nobody was interested in conquering the Arabs? Any guess? Huh? It's not fertile land. What are you going to do with it? Oh, why would you send your soldiers out to get barbecued? Like, what's the point? So the Persians would fight with the Romans, who could fight with the Abyssinians, who could fight with the Indians or whatever, because there's fertile land. There's rivers and woods and farmland and all of this stuff and other valuables. But what do the Arabs have? They got nothing. They got absolutely nothing. Things are different now, isn't it? So what do they have now? That's so... Oh, okay, yeah. That. So there is, you know, when resources show up, then wars begin. There were no resources, so nobody cared. Then the other thing was they were kind of jammed in between the borders of the Roman Empire on the one side and the Persian Empire on the other side. They were kind of in between. And so if they even did try to make some progress, like if the Romans tried to make some progress, who would get alerted? The Persians would get alerted. Maybe they're trying to move in on them so they can keep a closer eye on us. So they would get alerted, and it might trigger a war. So everybody left the Arabs alone, because if you try to mess with the Arabs, it might trigger a war between the actual superpowers. So they're just left alone. For centuries and centuries and centuries, these guys are left alone. They're just left alone. And when you're left alone, you just talk to yourself. And literally, the Arabs only spoke with each other. I mean, some people went out to do business to Persia and Rome and India or whatever, but the vast majority of the Arabs, who did they speak with? Themselves. So their language became purer and purer and purer and purer because they kept the language internal. They didn't share their language with other people. And other people were not interested in learning their language because you don't learn their language to get a job. You don't learn their language to go to university. You know, you just leave them alone. Like, you know, like most people are not interested in learning the Aborigines language in Australia because you can't put that on a resume. You understand? Like, what are you going to do with it? These people they don't have anything to offer as far as economics or opportunity. So, you know, unless you're like one of those geeks that just wants to learn it because you're a geek. This is what you do, you know. But otherwise you wouldn't learn it. So these Arabs, they only have themselves to talk to. Now compare that to a place like New York City. New York City, people from all over the world come, right? Like my family. We come from all over the world to New York City. And it's for most people in America, or for many people in America that are immigrants, that's sometimes the first impression they have of what America looks like. Like that's what they think America looks like is what New York looks like, which is crazy. Because the one place that doesn't look like the rest of the country is New York City. There's no other place like New York City in the United States. But they think that's what all America is. Anyway, so they come there. So the Bangladeshi comes there, the Pakistani comes there, the Sudanese, the Somali, the Turkish, the Greek, everybody comes there. And they all speak English as a first or a second language. So you hear every accent in the world. You hear every accent in the world, especially on the subway. I've seen some amazing things on the subway. Incredible things. I've seen some Russians like harassing an Indian guy. Hey, sing some of that Indian song for me. And then they start singing Indian songs in a Russian accent. I won't go that far, but It was hilarious though. Why are you not singing for me? So anyway, so you'll hear all these cultures are just colliding. And guess what suffers? The one language that suffers is actually English. So even if people who speak English, because they always have to deal with ESLs around them, their English actually starts going down. So the worst English you will hear in the entire United States is probably going to be in New York City. Right? It's probably the case, that they're going to have the worst English. And the foulest language and all of it. All of it. Grammatically completely incoherent. Hey, what you doing? I don't know. I don't know. That was common. If you say, I don't know, it's like, look at you, Mr. English. So, what I'm saying is when a city is multicultural and a lot of people are visiting it or whatever, its own language suffers. The opposite is true. If there's a place where nobody outside is coming, there's no outside influences, what happens? That language flourishes. It becomes more and more refined. I'll give you another example, like Urdu, my first, second language. First, second, or third. I don't know which one it is anymore. But anyway, Urdu is one of the languages I speak and love. And Urdu is heavily influenced, more recently, in the last 10, 15 years, Urdu is more heavily influenced by English than anything else. Right? So Urdu speakers cannot actually get through a sentence without incorporating an English word, except even if they speak perfect English, when they incorporate the English word, they have to say it in an accent, an Urdu accent. Okay? So I did this as an experiment with my cousin. My cousin and I were on a road trip. It's a long road trip, so I was like, how about let's just do an experiment. From here on, like we have 3 hours left, we will speak to each other in Urdu. But the condition is we cannot use a single word of English. Go. And he goes, यार नुमान ये बड़ा difficult है क्योंकि बहुत सारी vocabulary जो है वो complicated होती है और उसके अंदर फिर इंसान forget कर देता है. So that's what you call foreign influence. So even if you don't know Urdu, you heard a bunch. And the guy does not have an accent when he speaks in English. When he does, because he thinks of it now as an Urdu word. Forget it. Complicated. Like, just kind of rolls off the tongue. Anyway, one more point. So the Arabic language became very, very pure over the centuries, right? That's one. Second thing, what did they have all around them? What do they look at? The Arab wakes up in the morning, looks outside. Nothing. He sees absolutely nothing. And when you see absolutely nothing, your imagination goes wild. Your imagination is very active because you see nothing. Did you know that historically some of the most creative, poetic, and philosophical, and picturesque literature that's ever been written anywhere in the world was written in prison? Some of the most remarkable writings you'll find all over the world were actually written in prison. Why do you think that is? One of the reasons for that is when you don't get to see, then your mind is the only thing that can paint a picture for you. So you become more creative than ever before. So they're in this desert prison, you can call it. They don't see rivers and trees. They don't see that stuff, but they develop a language and they harness a language over the years that is so picturesque and it's so full of imagery. It's so rich in like visuals. And almost because they had to find, if they can't see beautiful scenery around them, they had to paint beautiful scenery with their words. So the Arabic language is unusually visual, unusually picturesque. I'll give you a small example of that, the imagery of the Arabic language, just one small example, so you get a taste of what I'm talking about, okay? The Arabic word for the intellect is al-aql, aql, ayn, qaf, and lam. You could write, I guess, apostrophe AQL. Or AQAL, okay, aql. Aqala, the verb actually means when you take, you see some Arabs, they wear the scarf thingamajiggy? And they got the rubber doohickey thing on top? What do you think the rubber doohickey's purpose is? Hold it for windy days. Actually, no. Originally, that was not its purpose. It was not a device to protect you from your gear from flying off. Aql, this was actually called the iqal. Iqal, it was a rope. And they used to wrap it around their heads in ancient times. So this is just, the rubber doohickey is just symbolic. But the original thing was actually a rope that they wrapped around their head. And they used to ride on camels and horses back in the day, right? So if they park their camel somewhere, the camel does not come with anti-lock brakes. So it's not, you can't just park it outside and go, ew, ew, and just walk into the restaurant or the tent and come out and the car is still there. The camel's gonna what? It's gonna wander off. So you need to have some kind of brake device. And what's that device? They take this off, tie it up, and go in. So it was a leash. You could call it a leash that they wrapped on their head. So two reasons they call this the intellect is because when they think of this, what do they think of? The thing that is over here, the iqal, the thing that covers their brain. But the other reason they thought of it is because a leash, what does it do? It restricts your movement, right? The camel just can't go wherever it wants. It has a limited amount of space it can go. They say the intellect is something that holds you back from doing stupid things. It puts a leash on you. Like there's a fire. I should just walk in. No, the intellect says that's a dumb idea. Stand back. So the intellect becomes a kind of what? A leash for you not to do ridiculous, dumb things. It keeps you safe, So now, whenever they say intellect, what picture comes in their head? Camel on a leash, horse on a leash. Like they took something that we would just think of, like any other language, you would just say this is, brain is brain, mind is mind, intellect is intellect. No, for them it has to be a picture. It has to be a picture. Even verbs are associated with pictures, Now thinking becomes associated with putting a leash on something. It's amazing. So they had these amazing visualizations for their entire language. For pretty much everything they talk about, there's some kind of another visualization that came in my head that you might like. It's graphic. And I know how much you guys like PG-13 images. Anyone know what a knife is called in Arabic? Sikin. Sikin is called a knife. Sikin comes from sukun. Sukun means a pause. They say a knife is something that when you stab the animal with, it stops moving. The blood drains and it's stopped. Sikin is a device to stop. And sikin also has coolness in it. Like sukun has coolness in it. Like the body when it's stabbed, when the animal's slaughtered, what happens to its body? It goes cold. So the device that brings stillness and coolness to the animal before we kill it. So sikin. Crazy. They don't just call it a knife or a sharp thing. They have this like whole picture associated with it. So this was, before Islam, they developed this really amazing thing. Now again, what did they have to look outside? I've made a few points with you so far. One, their language became pure. Two, their language became very picturesque, very visual. Three, did they have anything they could be proud of other than their language? Could they say, we have the best sand? Could they? There was physically nothing you could say that they were proud of. Sports teams you could be proud of. Doesn't every people, every tribe, every nation need something to be proud of? Even Ohio is proud of something. Texas is proud of something. New York is proud of something. New York is proud of the fact that they're not New Jersey. When you drive into New York from New Jersey, it says, welcome to New York. We don't like you either. In Texas, it says things like, don't mess with Texas. It's the kinds of signs you get, Other places, they're like, I think it's South Carolina, they're really proud of their peaches. So there's a giant peach instead of the water towers, they paint them as a peach. Like, okay, well, you know what? That's whatever floats your state. That's, So people have to have something they're proud of. But they didn't have physically anything that said, look at that, we have this. Nobody else can even come close. But what they did have was what? Their visual, rich, pure, refined language. So they said, nobody speaks like we do. As a matter of fact, I know this sounds politically incorrect, but they basically said anybody else who doesn't speak Arabic speaks like someone who is a mental disability, ajam. They're retarded. Like every other language sounds retarded compared to Arabic to them. Because it's not nearly as cool, not nearly as rich, not nearly as powerful as the Arabic languages. So they were proud of it. And when you're proud of something, you really take care of it. A nation that's proud of their soccer team or football team, a state that's proud of their basketball team, they put a lot of money into what? Basketball and football. Why do you think there's so many football stadia and high schools here that are the size of like airports in Texas? Because it's a big deal. It's a big deal over here. You understand? So they made a big deal out of what? Arabic. Huge deal. And they would have, the way, like we have the NBA playoffs or we have the NFL finals or whatever, they would have poetry slams. The tribes would have poetry slams. And the poets who would win, and they literally had, I don't know what they're called, I think they're called rap battles when you diss each other. They literally had rap battles thousands of years ago, and the tribe that loses would be so mad that they lost, they would kill their poet. Like, we lost because of him. You couldn't diss the other guy well enough. So they would have rap battles, they would have poetry contests. Poetry was literally like spitting rhymes with them. And there would be like crowds and crowds of people gathered, huge bonfire, this guy's spitting his rhymes, people going, oh! And then somebody gets rich or somebody gets killed. Like it was serious. It was serious. This is like the equivalent of like, you know how the Romans used to throw people and then release the lions and the whole line? This is the kind of thing the Arabs had. So this was big to them. This was no joke to them. Now the Quran comes. The Quran came in the form of a book or just words? Just words. Arabic words. And the Arabs are really good at Arabic. They're really, really good at Arabic. And if there's one thing they love competition in is what? Just give me something. And by the way, they accused the Quran of being poetry. One of the accusations against the Quran was just poetry. So the Quran says, fine, if it's poetry, then let's have a poetry slam. Why don't you produce something that can defeat the Quran? Go ahead. One time the Prophet ﷺ, without telling the Arabs that this is actually from the Quran, had Surah Al-Kawthar written down. Had Surah Al-Kawthar enter a poetry contest. Inna a'atinaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. All the poets are coming with long qasidas, long lines of poetry, and they're dropping it. And you know, and the big slam, like the finals, the national championship used to happen in Mecca, and it used to happen right at the Kaaba. And the trophy was, your poetry, if it wins, we will hang it on the wall of the Kaaba. That was the prize. Like you get your trophy, your poetry gets to get hung on the wall of the Kaaba. The Prophet says, enter Surah Al-Kawthar into the contest. He doesn't tell anybody it's Quran, and it's been entered into the context. Everybody's spitting their rhymes, and everybody's rhymes are like 100 lines, 100 lines, 100 lines. Surah Al-Kawthar comes down with what? 3. And the poets who were listening, now listen. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar ma hadha qawlu al-bashar is what the entire crowd said. They added another line. The line they added was, this is not the word of a human being. This ain't even human. The entire crowd said this. They hung it on the Kaaba. They didn't even know that it's Quran. That's why they hung it on. When they found out it's Quran, they took it down. Subhanallah. That was the non-Arabs. Then there was one of their best poets. They said the Quran keeps challenging us. Produce a surah like it. You are the best poet we got. Walid ibn Mughira. You are like on top. Why don't you go do a poetry slam with Muhammad? He's sitting right there. Go take him on, one-on-one. We'll just watch from a distance. No pressure. He goes, I got this. He walks up to the Prophet ﷺ. He says, why are you creating a problem in Makkah? Come on, man. You're our people. Why are you, people accept your religion and brother starts fighting with brother, father can't get along with son anymore. Why are you, our tribe needs to stick together. What do you want? You want women? Is that what you want? We can get you pretty women if you want. You want money? We'll get you money. Do you want to be the governor of Makkah? Is that what you want? All right, you know what? We'll make you the governor. Tell me what you want. I'll give it to you. This is the speech he had with the Prophet. The Prophet listened to all of this bakwas. And he said to him, are you done? You finished? He said, yeah, I'm done. the Prophet ﷺ starts reciting some Quran. Just some Quran. Walid ibn Mughira, if he was alive today, you know what he'd make O'Reilly look like a kitten. Like, he's a debater. You don't mess with Walid ibn Mughira. And the Prophet ﷺ is doing what in response? Reciting some Quran. Walid ibn Mughira is sitting there. The Arabs are looking from a distance. They're like, what happened to this guy? What's going on? He's not saying anything. Walid is crying. And he cries so hard. Then the Prophet gets to an ayah, a particular ayah, where basically Allah says, if they don't listen, then warn them of the kind of punishment that came to Ad and Thamud. And he knew about Ad and Thamud, but the way in which Allah said it, Walid grabbed the mouth of the Prophet and said, stop, I can't take any more. I can't, just please stop. And he walked away, shoulders hung. And the Arabs who were looking, finally the problem's over. Walid probably taught him a lesson. Walid comes back and says, what happened to you? What happened to your face? Like, literally they said, the face you went with is not the face you came back with. The way we'd say that is, what happened to your face, bro? Why do you look like that? And he says, whatever that man has to say is going to happen. And they said, oh, come on. He put a spell on you too? And he goes, it ain't magic. What I heard over there has a sweetness I've never heard before. And I know poetry, and that ain't poetry. And I know magicians, and that sounds nothing like magic. And I know people that are insane that just blabber. That is not insanity. This is the kind of speech that will win, and nothing will win over it. إِنَّهُ يَعْلُو وَلَا يُعْلَى عَلَيْهِ. It will win, it will dominate, and it will not be dominated. And they're like, come on, man, he put a spell on you. He goes, think whatever you will, I ain't messing with him again. He walks away. He walks away. Now, the real point of this first session. The Arabs could destroy you with their words, yes? That's what they do. As a matter of fact, I want to give you one more example of how sick the Arabs were when it came to their language. Oh man. There was one of the poets of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet loved poetry. He couldn't do it. Allah made him incapable of doing poetry. وَمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ الشِّعْرَ. We didn't teach him poetry at all. وَمَا يَنْبَغِي لَهُ. It doesn't fit him either. He was not capable of poetry. Is it true that maybe if you're not good at something, you still like it? So Allah did not make him capable of poetry, but he certainly liked it. Like there are some of you brown kids really love hip hop. You can't remember the lyrics for your life, but you still go. You know. I don't know what he's saying, but it's awesome. Rasulullah does not know how to make poetry. So he had a poet. One of the companions was a poet. And he was really good at poetry. So the Prophet would have him make poetry when the Muslim army would go. You know how the armies have like a hoo-ha or a chant or whatever? You know? He would make the chants that everybody would sing. So he was the guy that would do the poetry. Now, I told you all the tribes used to compete with each other, right? Even the Muslim tribes competed with each other in which one's the bravest tribe, which one's the most generous tribe. So he made a poem about his tribe. Hassan made a poem about his tribe. It's really awesome. لَنَا الْجَفَنَاتُ الْغُرْ يَلْمَعْنَ بِالضُّحَى وَأَسْيَافُنَا يَقْطَرْنَ مِنْ نَجْدَةٍ دَمَا. We have really shiny bowls, it begins. And I was like, what does shiny bowls mean? I'll tell you what it means. You give charity in bowls. Like you put coins of silver and whatever, you put them in bowls. He goes, the bowls with which we give charity, even they are shiny. So imagine the stuff we put inside. That's what he's saying. يَلْمَعْنَ بِالضُّحَى. They twinkle during the day. وَأَسْيَافُنَا يَقْطَرْنَا. And our swords keep dripping. They keep dripping drops of blood because we keep going on impossible rescue missions. In other words, one of ours gets captured, we go with a team of 3 or 4, we take on the entire tribe, covert operation, Splinter Cell style, stealth assassin style, Assassin's Creed style. We go in there and we keep going on these impossible rescue missions, risking our lives, so much so that our swords don't even get a chance to become dry. They keep dripping drops of blood. So the first line was about how generous they are with their bowls, and the second was about how brave they are. How courageous they are, right? So this is a pretty epic line he dropped, and everybody's like, oh. But Khansa radiallahu anha, a female sahabiya, comes to him and says, that was pretty epic. I have some comments though. You said jafanat. Jafanat is a kind of plural that's weak. The Arabs have a stronger plural, jifan. If you use jifan, it would have meant you have a lot of bowls. But since you use jafanat, it means you only have like 9 or less bowls. So you're not really that rich. Then you use the word al-ghur. Al-ghur, yalma'na bid-duha. You said that they twinkle. Al-ghur means they're shiny. Anything, a rock could be shiny. You should have said al-bid, so shiny they look white. You used the wrong word. It wasn't strong enough. Then you said yalma'na bid-duha, they twinkle during the day. I was like, frogs twinkle during the day too. That's not a big deal. If something sparkles during the night, now that's something. And reflecting light is different from giving off light. If something is so shiny, it feels like it's actually not just reflecting light, but it's giving off light. You should have said yushriqna bil-layali. They give off light during the nighttime. Like they become a source of light. That's how epic our bowls are. So that was kind of weak. And then she says, well, asyafuna, you said our swords. The word you used for swords was asyaf. That's a weaker plural, which means you have like 9 swords. But you should have said suyufuna, you have many swords. Then you said yaqtarna, they drip with blood. I was like, what is that? What did you cut the enemy's nail? What did you cut? What did you cut? I said, paper cuts you're giving the enemy? You should have said yajrina, they flow. And you said daman, which is drops of blood. I was like, what is that? Drops of blood doesn't hurt. You should have said dima'an, rivers of blood. Come on, dude, make some poetry. She destroyed him. She's destroyed, and they love doing this. They loved doing this. By the way, I have a lot of Arab friends. This is in their blood. Like correcting you could have said that better. It's in their blood. They will constantly tell you, you said that? If you said it like this, it would have been better. That was a good khutbah, but if you mentioned this ayah or that ayah, it would have been better. Every time, without fail. Without fail. And you will think, why are they so critical? Why are they always correcting me? Then you realize, this is ancient, bro. This has been going on for thousands of years. This is part of their culture. This is part of their heritage. They hear something and they say, not epic enough. No. Here's how you could make it better. To these people, 604 pages of the Quran is coming down. What's their first reaction going to be? Critique it. You said that, could have been this. You said that, could have been this. Isn't it? They don't do it. They don't do it. They're baffled. As a matter of fact, they are so baffled that they were ready to fight and kill Muslims instead of produce a surah like the Quran. Now you tell me, what is a surah made up of? Words. All they had to do was come up with some words, and the problem of Islam is finished. The Quran is finished. All you have to do is come up with some words. For those Arabs, shedding blood, killing and getting killed, fighting their own tribes people, going to war multiple times, all of this, and by the way, you don't have a slam where you have a week to come up with something. The Prophet is there for 10 years. And 2/3 of the Quran comes down. That's 400 pages of Quran. Let's come down. Critique one ayah. Go ahead. Make fun just come up with something about Surah Al-Kawthar, 3 ayat. Just come up with one surah. First the challenge was, you bring 10 surahs, this is over. I'll stop preaching. Allah told him to say that. Okay, no, just bring one surah. How about, I'll go easy on you guys. Just why don't you bring one surah? Then Allah says, okay, you know what? Why don't you bring anything like the Quran? And why don't you gather, even if all humanity got gathered, and all the jinns, if you can find the jinns, go gather them too. If they can bring something like the Quran, go ahead. La ya'tuna bimithlihi, you're not bringing nothing. He openly just said it. Quran just said it. Called it out. And the ultimate proof of that is, spilling blood for them was easier, coming up with an ayah was harder. How in the world is that possible? How in the world?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر